very much, Madam Chairperson. The protocols have already been ably established, and I want to take advantage of them, but permit me to recognize my distinguished sister and colleague of Cabinet, the Honorable Dr. Vindhya Prasad, our representative of the IDB, my colleagues at the head table, of course the Honorable Chancellor of the Judiciary, the distinguished Director of Public Prosecutions, the learned Senior Magistrate performing the functions of Chief Magistrate, and all the other distinguished ladies and gentlemen whose presence and portfolios have already been recognized in the protocols established. It is indeed an honor for me to be here at this simple but very important opening ceremony. We are part of history in the making. The type of services that will be provided here and the combination of those services have never been provided before in the history of our country. And we have learned that they are not available anywhere in the English-speaking Caribbean. Domestic violence, sexual violence, familial violence, violence against children, trafficking in person are social atrocities and criminal offenses that regrettably permeate our society in an unusually high rate. Measures have been taken over the years, strategies designed and unleashed, programmatic approaches have been launched, laws have been enacted in our continuous attempt to curb these horrific occurrences in our society. But the truth is that we have not been successful. And all the agencies have tried. The police force, the various ministries of government, the judicial system, the religious organizations, the international community has funded us. We have employed the expertise of qualified people across the globe, enlisting their expert guidance. And the truth is that today, I don't think we are better off than we were before in terms of the rate at which these horrific tragedies take place. You pick up the newspapers on any given day, and you are likely to find raging and outrageous front page stories in the press reporting these atrocities. We can't give up. We cannot give up, because this can very well consume all of us. We therefore have to continue to battle. We have to continue to pursue traditional methods while we explore new opportunities and new innovations, as we continue to marshal our efforts to overcome this beast that resides right across the length and breadth of our country. When these occurrences take place, they have an impact that is far from the immediate hurt, the immediate pain, the immediate anguish, the immediate suffering, the immediate loss of life that may result. It has an impact that is lifelong for those directly affected, and in some cases generational. So the victim of sexual violence, the empirical data would establish, and the experts will tell you, never recover. Never recover. They live the rest of their lives suffering from that trauma, and it affects their entire psychology. It affects the way they function. It deprives them of opportunities that they would ordinarily would have been able to take advantage of. It affects the way they bring their family up. And those scars and the deficiencies that they come with become hereditary. It is transmitted from that victim when she becomes a mother, when she becomes a wife, onto her children. It affects her ability to be a wife and to be a mother. When a parent dies as a result of domestic violence, which sometimes is often committed in the presence of the children become permanently affected in the most negative way. First of all, they lose a parent. The family unit is fractured thereafter. If it is a father, if it is a mother who dies, the father goes to prison. The children become without parental guidance. Right there, the grounding is laid for deviant conduct and for them to branch off or to be influenced to follow a life of crime, or at least socially deviant conduct. Then, as I said, they may have witnessed the killing firsthand. That afflicts them with another host of issues. And it continues like that. If they ever become parents themselves, they would never be normal. So it passed down to them. That's why I'm saying it is generational. And they will behave, their conduct, their future conduct will be deeply affected or influenced by the tragedy that they endured, and that passes on to their children. So it becomes generational, one generation after another. And it is a vicious cycle. And what we are witnessing today is evidence of that cyclical, unfortunate perpetuation of something that started in our society during colonial times. But we, as Guyanese, trying to build a modern Guyana, must confront this proverbial bull by the horns. And we are doing so. We once thought that our Domestic Violence Act was a good piece of legislation, and it was. In fact, we were hailed in the Caribbean in 1996 as being the leader on the legislative front in relation to that piece of legislation. 30 years after, we reflect upon it, and we reflect upon the reality and the impact that it may have had or has had on this scourge, and we realize that it did not deliver in the manner that we have anticipated. But then again, had it not been there, it perhaps would have been, you would have been in a place 100 times worse than we are. Only last year, I recall reading in the press, a woman, being a victim of domestic violence right here on the east coast of Demerara, approached the court and was granted a restraining order under the legislation, restraining the man, the abuser, from coming within a particular distance from her, but more particularly from entering the matrimonial home. When the order was made in the absence of the man, and when the police served the order on the man took the order, he had it in one hand, and he had a cutlass in the other hand, and he chopped her to death. And these are the real occurrences that we have to tackle. We will overhaul that legislation. A draft bill, a bill is already prepared, that will be tabled in the National Assembly just after we conclude discussions on our national budget. And that bill is a studied piece of legislation. It examined the existing legislation, and we had the opportunity of nearly 35 years experience to look at. So that was the first thing that was done. We looked at the legislation, we identified all the weaknesses, and we did so having held consultations with lawyers, with the judiciary, with police officers, and with victims. And we accumulated all those, and we put them in a pile. And then we looked at modern legislation, and as I said, traditional thinking and traditional strategies have not worked. We don't normally borrow legislation from the United States. But the United States has a strong regime of regulation regarding domestic violence in their legislation across the different states. New York in particular, and we borrowed heavily from the New York legislation. The law that we have currently is largely civil in nature. This one will both be civil and criminal. The police in the existing law has very limited powers because, as I said, it's a civil piece of legislation and not criminal. In this one, the police has great powers to arrest and to detain. In that one, the police had to rely on the ordinary criminal law to detain, to arrest, and keep in custody, because the Domestic Violence Act did not create a regime of criminal offenses. So the police had to go under the ordinary law of assault, wounding, grievous bodily harm, etc., to exercise their police powers. Now they will be specially empowered under this law with specific powers in relation to domestic violence complaints. And police, it is expected that these powers that the legislation will give to the police will not be abused. We are also working on an overhaul of the Sexual Offences Act. The Sexual Offences Act is now over 12 years old, and it was a very new and innovative piece of legislation. Again, at the time when we promulgated that act, we led the way in the Caribbean. 12 years after, we have identified weaknesses and deficiencies. Again, we have done so after consulting with important stakeholders. For example, the Director of Public Prosecutions, again the judiciary, and the police, and the private practicing bar. And we have accumulated those recommendations. And we will have an amended Sexual Violence Act soon. We have completed the draft of a sexual harassment bill, and this is a CARICOM generated model legislation, and Guyana will be the first to enact it locally, and that will be done again just after we conclude our budget debates. We are also working on, I forget the related legislation. No, I said sexual harassment just now. Yes, but we are working on a series of legislation. So that's one platform that we are working on. But we have learned, and you will agree with me, that the law alone can't solve this problem. We are working on training programs to train our officers across every platform that will engage in the battle against these problems. And these training programs are ongoing. The Restorative Justice Program is part and parcel of that new training initiatives that we are embarking upon. Again, in synergy with the Ministry of Human Services, this year we will align the Restorative Justice Program with the probation department and probation services offered by the Ministry of Human Services across the country. It would always have been an uphill task to build out the Restorative Justice Program across the country if we had to find buildings and other facilities that would require accommodating it in the various regions of our country. Fortunately, it is a service and it is a discipline that is very close to that of the probation service offered by the Ministry of Human Services. And the probation services of that ministry already enjoys an institutional and harmonious relationship with the criminal justice system across our country. We will now twin that probation service with restorative justice across the country. And that will now present another unique combination of services that we have never experienced before. So, Your Worship, when you summon the probation officer for his guidance in assisting you to determine a particular case before you, the probation officer will have with him, if you so desire, the restorative justice officer. And wherever the magistrate court is, I have been informed we have a probation department not far therefrom. So we are marrying these services. Why? Because we are engaged in the same battle. And we have to think outside of the box. Our police stations and our courts are now being built and designed with specific and special facilities for domestic violence victims and sexual violence victims. So I'm showing you the multifaceted approach that we have fashioned to embattle these social and criminal atrocities. And of course, our police officers now, our social workers, and at every strata of the different system, our officers are being trained to deal with these new challenges. Our prison, we are working on a new prison system, both institutionally and systemically, as well as physically. And the largest block of our prison operations will be located just about a mile from where I'm standing, going south along this roadway. We're working on a new prison act that will govern the new facilities. As I said recently, the purpose and focus of punishment has changed over the years. At one time, it was punitive. Now, it is rehabilitative. So we have to fashion new strategies, new edifices, new laws to accommodate these changes. We have been engaging with the prison services under this very Support for Criminal Justice project, and we have already donated to them over 100 or more computers and printers. We have created a computer system, a computer department within the prison system. And this year we will be training, I believe, some 60 prison officers at the University of Guyana to improve their skills so that they can deal with the new reforms that we are implementing. All these different measures are connected. If the person, after he's sentenced for the domestic violence or he's sentenced for the sexual violence, comes out of the prison worse than he went in, then what will happen? He will continue along that path with even greater destruction now. When he goes in there, we want him to come out as a rehabilitated person so that he can reintegrate with greater ease into society, being a reformed human being. And that brings me to this facility, which is yet another manifestation of the new and innovative measures that we are implementing. I recall attending a spotlight meeting with the distinguished Minister of Human Services, and she was articulating a case for a facility that would closely resemble this. And it struck me, listening to her, that we can join hands and produce a product that is even more embracing and more comprehensive than the one she was articulated for. I immediately held discussions with her, and we found commonality on the concept. I presented the case to the IADB because it was not part of the traditional agreed project. This was a departure. And I explained that the traditional methods have not worked. That some of the things that you are recommending that we do in Guyana were born and designed and conceived for a different type of society, and may never work in a society like Guyana. That we have to study the idiosyncrasies and the social peculiarities of our people and our society and design a product that will uniquely meet the demands of what we are tackling. And I did not face much difficulties in persuading our most important developmental partner, the Inter-American Development Bank, in amending the support for criminal justice to accommodate this facility. This facility will house social services, probation services, counseling. It will house medical services. It will house legal services. We hope that we will have a permanent police presence here. It is strategically located a stone throw away from the closest medical center in this community or on the east coast of Demerara, the Lusignan Health Center. It is strategically located between Vigilance Police Station and the Betefo Police Station. And it is strategically situated, cradling two magisterial districts. Well, in the same magisterial district were two different courts, the Sparangna Magistrates Court and the Vigilance Magistrates Court. When the victim comes here, depending upon the allegation, you have those different number of services that they will immediately receive. And most importantly, there is a facility here that will allow for that victim to be accommodated for periodic intervals. Why? Our experiences have shown that when the victim makes the report to the police or to any relevant agency, the victim has to return home to the source of the violence because the victim has no alternative accommodation. And the empirical data will establish beyond doubt that when that happens and the abuser becomes aware that a report has been made or that a complaint has been made public, then the abuse intensifies. This place will provide accommodation, will provide medical service, will provide legal advice, will provide therapy and counseling, and we'll have the police here so that a process can be activated for the arrest or at least investigation of the complaint. And that is why this is a unique package. And it is our hope, once successful, to replicate this across the country. The Minister has already made reference to another such facility which we will be launching in Region 3. And these are the two pilots. Once we are able to establish that these pilots have been successful, then they can be expanded. I gave some reasons as to why here was chosen, Lusignan. But there are some additional factors too. First of all, it's very accessible. It is also located in a highly populated part of our country. I spoke about the locations of the medical center, the police stations, the magistrates court. It is also where we had available land. We got this land with the permission, of course, from the government of Guyana and Gaisuku. But more importantly, if you look around, there is a potential for expansion because all these lands and these properties are Gaisuku's properties. And the same way that we acquire this, we can persuade the relevant powerful people that we can get those and we can make use of them for the benefit of our people. So there's great potential for expansion of these facilities. And there's another very important factor as well. We have 12 virtual courts just down this road that many people don't know about. And it is not too far from Georgetown and not too far down. So it is centrally located for people to access easily across the east coast of Demerara. I ask specifically that our community leaders be invited. And I see our NDC chairman and several councillors are here, and 3 prominent religious leaders are here. Because I want you to market this project. And in marketing this project and this initiative, you have to ensure that it is used properly and it is taken care of. You should be proud that this facility, the only of its kind in the entire Caribbean, is located in your community and in your NDC. You are the local leaders on the ground. You walk the streets every day. You live in these communities. You wield tremendous influence. Many of these problems to which I'm making reference, they come to you sometimes for resolution. When you know of an appropriate case, you can save a life if you bring the people or ensure that they are brought here. I want to conclude by thanking a number of people who have made this possible. And I fear that if I begin to mention, I may omit, and that will put me in some problems. But many persons have helped in making this a reality. His Excellency the President, when the project was pitched to him, had no difficulty in intervening for us to get the land from the Guyana Sugar Corporation. The various stakeholders who participated with us, I want to recognize their efforts. The IADB for so willingly flexing their project portfolio to accommodate this initiative, and those who are administering the Support for Criminal Justice Project, Ms. Indira Ananjit and Rabindra Kanai, and so many other persons who worked fervently to make this possible. I want to thank you very much. And let us use this. This is not my initiative or Vindhya Prasad's initiative or the government of Guyana's initiative. Yeah, well, we may have initiated the process, but it is not our product. It is all of us. And that is why I strategically ask respectfully for the presence of certain stakeholders whose input is so prerequisite for it to be successful. This is all of our project. We are confronting a problem that none of us can be proud of. A problem that transcends every divide that may usually divide us. A monster that will engulf all of us unless we arrest it. And I can't do it alone. The government of Guyana cannot do it alone. We have to do it jointly and severally. And your efforts and your energy and your cooperation in this exercise are extraordinarily vital. So I look forward to it. And I thank you very much.